Trusted a psychologist for 10 years, spilled my darkest secrets to my abuser, discovered she was just my mom's friend. I spent years talking to someone I believed was a trained professional, a psychologist who was helping me cope with the trauma of my childhood. But it turns out, she wasn't a psychologist at all. Let me take you back to where it all started. My childhood was far from ordinary, disturbingly so. To this day, I have no memories of anything that happened from when I was born up to the age of 13. That entire portion of my life is just gone. What I do know comes from bits and pieces, fragments I've picked up over time. A blend of vague, fleeting recollections, things family members have told me, and what I've managed to piece together from police reports. Among the handful of memories I do retain, one person stands out. I called her Auntie. That's all she was ever known to me as. No first name, no surname, no professional title. Just Auntie. And for the longest time, I never questioned it. I met her when I was 7. Our sessions took place in her living room. She would always be typing diligently on her laptop as I talked. She was quiet, patient, and came across as warm in the way adults sometimes are when they want children to trust them. And I did. I saw her once a month, and there was never a reason to think anything was off. Fast forward 7 years to when I was 14. By then, things had deteriorated emotionally. I opened up to Auntie about how I'd been seriously struggling, about the fact that I had tried to end my life multiple times. It was the result of many factors: my mother's increasingly manipulative behavior, my profound sense of isolation, and more than anything, my inability to come to terms with the buried horrors of my early years. I was desperate for answers. I remember riding in the car to Auntie's house and asking my mother if I could ever see someone else. Someone who might help me in ways Auntie clearly couldn't. She just snapped at me to be quiet. It was around then that I began to feel the cracks in my relationship with my mother, cracks that would only widen over time. A lot of our therapy sessions became about her. I'd talk through the confusion, the pain, the unpredictability of her moods, and how lost I felt. But whenever I spoke of how my mother hurt me emotionally, Auntie would either make excuses for her or tell me I was overreacting. It didn't make sense. I kept trying to rationalize it, telling myself maybe Auntie was trying to give me a different perspective. Maybe she was just trying to help me understand my mother, as twisted as that felt. But her defenses of my mother weren't isolated. Similar. Things kept happening. And slowly, the trust I had in Auntie began to erode. By 16, I wasn't exactly a model teenager. I'd sneak out, go to parties, drink, and keep my personal life hidden from my family. But then Auntie began asking me unusually pointed questions about my behavior, especially about things I never mentioned in our sessions. I was caught off guard. I tried to reason that maybe, after nearly a decade of knowing me, she had just developed an instinct for these things. But the specificity of her questions was jarring. Over time, she didn't even pretend to ask subtly. She directly referenced events, parties, and decisions I made, things I never disclosed to her. By the time I was 17, the bond between me and my mother had completely deteriorated. The worst part? Auntie had started bringing my mother into our sessions. At the end of each one, she'd call her in and relay, word for word, everything I had shared. I was trapped, listening to my private thoughts being weaponized right in front of me. I'd speak about the mental abuse I was enduring, and she'd repeat it back to my abuser like it was nothing. My home life became unbearable. My academic performance dropped. I wasn't allowed to see friends or even go outside freely. I was completely isolated. On my 17th birthday, I broke. I ran into my mother's room with the intention of doing something, anything, to end it all. I was searching frantically, not even thinking clearly, just looking for something I could use to hurt myself. Eventually, I ended up in her walk-in closet, a place I'd rarely entered and had completely forgotten existed. That's where I saw it, a suitcase tucked under some clothes. It looked newer than everything else in there. I opened it. What I found changed everything. It was packed with documents, page after page of printed transcripts from my sessions with Auntie. Going back, years. Literal transcripts of everything I had said. Seeing those records made me feel physically ill. My stomach turned. My skin went cold. I managed to take a few of the older pages without making it too obvious. I needed proof. As I sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through those papers, all the questions that had been simmering in the back of my mind burst into flames. That night, I made a decision. If I didn't get answers, real answers, I wouldn't live to see 18. I was running out of time. 18 meant independence, sure. But in my world, it also meant being thrown out with nowhere to go. So I began paying closer attention. I took mental snapshots of her home during sessions, looking for anything that might give away who she really was. I started interrogating my mother with more urgency, asking again and again who Auntie actually was. She always said the same thing. She's a psychologist. That wasn't enough anymore. So I did something drastic. I stole my mother's phone. She was in the shower, and I had already packed a bag in case I needed to disappear for a few days. As soon as I heard the bathroom door lock, I grabbed the phone and ran. I didn't even look at it until I was safely on a bus, far from home. First, I went through her messages. I scrolled until I found a conversation with a woman whose name I didn't recognize, one that included appointment confirmations. Bingo. But I kept scrolling for what felt like hours, and while there were plenty of chats, nothing stood out as incriminating. Then I checked her call logs. That's where I saw it. They talked constantly, too frequently to be unrelated. I realized then that they must have discussed me in detail over the phone. Smart, I'll give them that. Phone calls. Leave no paper trail. I needed more. I sat on the edge of a random sidewalk and started digging through social media. I searched the name I'd seen in the texts, but nothing came up. I almost gave up right there. The same nauseating hopelessness I'd felt the night before came back. But something told me to keep looking. And eventually, while aimlessly swiping, through my mother's followers list, I saw it. A familiar profile picture, but the account name was fake. Clicking on it, I instantly knew it was her. She had posted photos with some of my mother's friends. And then, deep in her feed, I found a photo of her with my mother, dated years back, before I was even born. That was it. They'd been friends all along. The betrayal hit like a freight train. It all made sense. Why Auntie dismissed my trauma, why she reported everything to my mother, why the sessions never helped. This wasn't therapy. This was surveillance. I returned home that night. I didn't even care what happened next. My mother beat me until I was black and blue, screaming that I had committed the ultimate betrayal. But none of it hurt as much as the truth I had discovered. I asked her one question. Who is Auntie, really? She didn't respond. Years passed. Eventually, I started university and was finally able to move out. An old friend, now one of my closest, offered me a place to stay. I got out the moment I could. That chance at freedom probably saved my life. I got closure in the most unexpected way. One evening, while cleaning up my Instagram account, I noticed a username that struck a chord. I searched it out of curiosity, and there she was. Auntie. But not the person I once thought I knew. Her bio didn't mention psychology. Instead, it read, chemistry teacher with over 20 years of experience. That night, I cried. All the pieces clicked together. The suspiciously detailed questions, the manipulation, the way my mother so effortlessly isolated me from everyone I cared about. It was never therapy. It was control. To this day, I mourn the years I've lost, not just to trauma, but to healing from it. While others my age are building memories, forming friendships, chasing dreams, I've been learning how to rebuild myself. 2 days ago, I had my first session with a real licensed psychologist. I did my homework this time. When I told him why I was there, I expected judgment. But he just nodded and said, "We've got a lot of work to do." We really do. I'm sharing my story in case someone out there is experiencing something similar. Therapy shouldn't leave you feeling worse. You deserve help, real help, from someone who's qualified and whose only interest is your well-being. And to Auntie, whoever you really are, let's never meet again. Stranded on a desert dirt road, hunted by hooded figures in the moonlight, years later, a forgotten photo reopened the nightmare. I was 21 at the time, working as a field technician. My job involved installing and maintaining devices for fuel, equipment at a series of gas stations across Utah. I had started in St. George and was slowly making my way north, heading toward Salt Lake City, which is where I lived back then. On this particular day, I had just wrapped up a job at one of the stations. It was already pretty late, somewhere around 10 or 11 p.m. I didn't feel like driving 2 more hours in the morning to the next stop, so I decided to press on that night and make it to the next town. Somewhere between Richfield and another small town. Honestly, I can't recall exactly where. I was following Google Maps when it told me to take a dirt road as a shortcut. I hesitated. It was odd that a dirt road would be part of the route, but I turned off the highway and followed. This was a long, desolate path surrounded by complete darkness, save for the reach of my high beams. I drove for maybe 5 to 7 minutes before the truck sputtered. It was an older 2008 work vehicle, far from reliable. I cursed under my breath, pulled over, and shifted it into park. Lifting the hood, I looked over everything, but nothing seemed obviously wrong. I know enough about engines to at least spot the basics. That's when I noticed no cell service, none on my personal phone, and none on my work phone either. I was completely disconnected. At that point, I had 2 options: stay put and wait until daylight, or walk and try to find a signal. I chose to walk. Normally, I carry a firearm with me on jobs like this, but this time I'd forgotten to bring it. All I had on hand was a 10-inch pipe wrench and a Milwaukee flashlight. Better than nothing. I set off into the night, feeling more uneasy with each step away from the truck. About 10 minutes into the walk, I heard laughter. Not natural, adult. Laughter, but something strange, muffled, like it came straight from a children's cartoon. It sounded like it came from right behind me. I whipped around. No one was there. Now my boots were sinking into loose sand as I pushed forward, faster and more alert. Then I heard it again, this time louder, closer, just a few feet away. My body went into full adrenaline mode. I took off, running deeper into the brush and sand, then quickly ducked behind a large rock nearby. The moon was bright enough to make out shapes, and in that moonlight I saw them, 2 figures running, silhouetted. I forgot to mention, once I realized I was being followed, I turned off my flashlight to avoid drawing attention. From my hiding place, I could hear them talking, though I was too far to make out their words. I was so shaken, I even typed out a goodbye message to my family and friends, telling them I loved them and apologizing for anything I may have done wrong in life. Of course, the messages never sent. No signal. But in that moment, it was how I coped. They didn't leave the area. I watched them linger near where I had been. The only plan I could come up with was to cause a distraction. I picked up 2 medium-sized rocks and tossed them far off, away from the direction of the truck and the road. It worked. I heard them run toward the noise. Crouching low, I made my way back through the brush toward the truck. Seeing that vehicle again felt like a miracle. I jumped in and did something risky, the only thing I could think of. I tried to start it. Took a few attempts, but it finally roared to life. I slammed it into drive and sped off down that dirt road as fast as I could. As I drove, I saw something that still unsettles me to this day. Figures hiding along the sides of the road, hooded, crouching low as I passed by. One of them was close, enough that I rolled down the window and threw my pipe wrench toward them. I didn't stop to see what happened. I just kept going. Later, I found out a hose had burst in the truck, though I don't recall exactly which one. I reached the next town and immediately called my boss. He was frustrated at being woken up so late but went quiet when I told him what had happened. He told me to report it to the sheriff and to get the truck looked at. The sheriff's office? Not much help. They acted like I'd just been sleep-deprived or hallucinating. They barely took notes. The mechanic was just as confused. Said he'd never heard of anything like that happening in the area. I ended up cutting my trip short and heading home. Not long after, I left that job entirely, though for unrelated reasons. Years later, I stumbled across an old photo I had taken during that service call. It brought everything rushing back. So now, I have to ask, who were those people? Why were they out there, chasing me through the desert? Were they just messing around? Or was I in real danger? How close did I come to being seriously hurt? Or worse, has anyone else gone through something similar in the middle of nowhere? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious. I thought it was just vacation flirting. Until my trainer started following me everywhere and wouldn't take no for an answer. Hi everyone. Today, I want to share a story from my teenage years that deeply unsettled me. Even now, I'm unsure how to process what happened. This experience took place when I was just 16 years old, and it still lingers in my memory. I hope telling it will bring some closure and maybe help others stay safe while traveling. To give you a bit of background, I'm a girl from Russia. At the time, I was a fairly petite teenager with light features, something that might seem unimportant. But unfortunately, it turned out to be relevant later on. My family and I went on vacation to Turkey, which was supposed to be a relaxing and enjoyable time together. Being someone who enjoys sports, I didn't waste any time upon arriving at the hotel. On the very first day, I went to the beach to play volleyball, a game I loved and was eager to join in on. That's where I first met him. His name was Ibrahim. He was a 19-year-old trainer at the resort and appeared to be in charge of organizing beach volleyball tournaments for guests. After a match ended, Ibrahim came up to me and surprisingly spoke in Russian. He asked my name and how old I was. I told him I was 16. He looked at me and responded in Russian, "Wow, you're little." At the time, I didn't read much into it. I assumed he was just making polite conversation, and since I didn't have much experience interacting with guys, especially older ones, I brushed it off. The next day, I went back to the beach to play volleyball again. After the game, Ibrahim approached me once more. This time, he asked for my phone number. I was naive and trusting. I assumed he simply wanted to keep in touch and maybe chat casually. It didn't even occur to me that he might have had other intentions. To be honest, I wasn't interested in him romantically at all. I've always preferred more reserved, European-type guys. But since I rarely spoke with non-Russian speakers, I thought it would be a good opportunity to practice my English. Later that evening, around 10 p.m., we agreed to meet on the beach to talk. When we first met up, the conversation was fairly normal. We discussed basic topics like travel, languages, and hobbies. He seemed surprised that I could speak English as well as I did, given that I was Russian. But not long into the conversation, I started to feel uneasy. That's when I began to understand just how vulnerable I really was. Alone on a dark beach, speaking to a man who was clearly older, stronger, and physically imposing. At one point, he took my hand without asking. He said, "Your hand is so warm and small. I like it." That moment truly frightened me. It made me realize how powerless I felt in that situation. On the walk back, he started asking me personal questions, like how many boyfriends I'd had. I told him I wasn't seeing anyone. Then he asked, "So you've never kissed a boy?" That question made me very uncomfortable, but I tried to laugh it off. When we parted ways, he attempted to hug me and leaned in as if he was going to kiss me on the cheek. I instinctively stepped away and avoided the contact. I didn't fully understand his behavior at the time, but I knew it didn't feel right. After that evening, I began to avoid him, but he didn't stop trying to reach me. He kept messaging me. I responded only when I felt I had to, but I started distancing myself as much as possible. Every time I returned to the volleyball court, he would take off his shirt. At first, I thought nothing of it. After all, it's the beach. But after a few days, I noticed that when I stopped going to play volleyball, he stopped removing his shirt during games. That's when I began to realize he might have been doing it for attention. Eventually, I quit playing volleyball altogether, just to avoid him. But even that didn't stop the unwanted attention. He continued to message me and insisted we meet again. He wrote things like, "You're so sweet," and "I really want to kiss you." His words were persistent and increasingly inappropriate. What scared me most was his physical presence around the hotel. He began showing up frequently in places where I happened to be. Sometimes, while I was eating with my family on the hotel terrace, he would approach our table, pretending to be a waiter or just casually walking by. Other times, when I was alone somewhere on the resort grounds, he would suddenly appear next to me and ask questions like, "Why do you look so serious and sad?" Or say disturbing things like, "You're so cute. I really want to kiss you." His constant presence made me feel unsafe. The idea that he could show up at any time on a closed resort property triggered serious anxiety. I even had a panic attack at one point, overwhelmed by the thought that I couldn't fully escape from him. What made things even harder was how my friends reacted at first. In the beginning, they downplayed the situation. They said it was nothing more than a typical holiday flirtation and encouraged me to just enjoy myself. Perhaps because Ibrahim seemed attractive to them, they didn't initially see the red flags. But after a while, even they became concerned and admitted they were worried about my safety. Eventually, I made the decision to block him entirely and do everything I could to avoid crossing paths with him. From that point forward, I never interacted with him again. But the damage had already been done. As a teenage girl, that experience left me with lasting fear and confusion. I often wonder if I somehow led him on or gave him the wrong impression. Part of me still feels guilty, like I must have done something to make him see me not as a person, but as an object. But deep down, I know that's not fair. No one should feel unsafe simply for being kind or open to conversation. Looking back, I understand that he took advantage of my inexperience and naivety. And for that, I say this clearly. Let's never meet again, Ibrahim.